Welcome to Careers Under Construction. I'm Justice Peterson. On this episode, we speak to Jeremy Reed, CEO of the University of Winnipeg Community Renewal Corporation 2.0. We talk about how this political insider became a downtown developer, how he turns crisis into opportunity, and how his organization built Canada's first near-zero carbon residential high-rise. Please enjoy Jeremy Reed. Thanks for coming in, Jeremy. I really appreciate you spending the time with us. I understand you just came in from Spruce Sands, Lake Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Geographically, I'm familiar with Lake Winnipeg, but I can't tell you I know where Spruce Sands is. Where
Just
is that?
kind of north of Camp Morton, so north of Gimli.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Interesting. Out there with the family?
Out there with the family.
Awesome. You have two boys?
I have two boys,
How old are
7
they?
and 2.5.
Oh, cool.
And I've got a daughter who's 25, so kind of
Cool, okay.
Into the woods for me.
I've got a 6 and a 7-year-old,
Yeah.
and then a 4-month-old.
Okay.
So I'm back to that diaper stage, and
Yeah.
it's
Back to the future. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's funny because with the two boys, I already forget what it's like to go back to diapers until we
Yes.
get the harsh reality of not sleeping again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm really interested to talk to you about your career today.
Sure.
You have a bit of an unorthodox one, which I think is going to be a good story.
Sure.
So your background is in political advisory, chief of staff,
Yeah.
and then moving into the COO and now CEO of Development Corporation. Can you kind of connect the dots there and just walk me through that story?
I'm not sure that I can, but I'll try.
Okay, that'd be great.
And in fact, my educational background is in literature and philosophy, just to make the story more interesting.
Oh wow,
right?
I didn't know that.
So my background is in literature, philosophy, and theology, and I think it'll connect. So from there, I did actually some community mental health work, and then some political work, and I'll let you make the connections there. And I was a political advisor for a while, and then ended up in the civil service in some federal provincial relations work. And when I was there, I was recruited to be a chief of staff to university president, to Lloyd Axworthy at the time at the University of Winnipeg, and spent a number of years doing that for Lloyd and then subsequently for Annette Trimby. And in that role, there was a lot of negotiating with government on funding for infrastructure. So
Right.
that's kind of where the starting of the development piece came in for me.
Okay.
But I did understand how to speak both to politicians and the civil service as
Right.
a result of my previous work.
Okay.
And also because I'd done some community mental health work, I understood kind of community development work. And what it was to be in the social services field. And then got into this nonprofit housing development and community infrastructure development through the CRC, first as the CAO, and then shortly thereafter as an acting CEO, and then the CEO of the University of Winnipeg Community Renewal Corporation and our community development organization, UWCRC 2.0.
So what year did you take into the COO role?
COO would have been 2016, and
Okay.
then within about a year and a half, I was acting. My predecessor actually was quite ill and died of cancer. So I stepped in and was kind of acting for a while, and then was appointed the CEO in 2020, ultimately.
How mature was the Development Corporation at the time you stepped into that role? Was it?
The University of Winnipeg Community Renewal Corporation was incorporated in 2006. So
Okay.
it had about a decade of development experience on campus redevelopment. So
Right.
most people who live in Winnipeg would identify some of those projects, whether it's the science building on Portage Avenue
Yep.
or the Bueller Center if they've had breakfast at Stella's,
Of course.
or gone to the Plug-in Art Gallery, or the Recplex, where there's, if you're a ultimate Frisbee player or a soccer player, you've probably played in that facility. So some of those kinds of facilities that were undertaken by us. So we did about $250 million of development under the original company, kind of while I was around as the chief of staff, but not in the Renewal Corporation. And then around 2016, after doing a lot of that community development or the university campus redevelopment work, we had a lot of community organizations and other post-secondary institutions and First Nations organizations come to us and say, hey, we've got some capital aspirations here. Can you help us? And really under that original company, we didn't have the mandate to do that. So we created a nonprofit with that mandate to assist the community in doing the infrastructure and building for ourselves. I think one of the early decisions we made was we're not certain about the future of this thing that we're creating, and we know that if we're going to make it sustainable, we need to have some of our own projects as well as delivering for clients, so that we're able to have some control over project destinies for our own right while we're developing for some of the other community organizations. And it's kind of worked out that way.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's the 2.0.
That's the 2.0 company. So the 2.0 company was incorporated in 2016. So we're about 9 years old now.
Okay.
By the end of this fiscal year, we'll have delivered about $250 million in primarily housing infrastructure, some for ourselves, and then about $50 million in other community infrastructure for clients.
Wow.
And so kind of from 2016 to 2020, we delivered our first two kind of $30 million projects. And then this round, we're kind of at $145 million we're developing currently. And our pipe for the next 3 years is probably double that. So we're kind of going from 200 units to adding 400 units this round, and we're looking at like 800 units the round after. So kind of like every development cycle about doubling. We've certainly benefited from the national housing strategy, and there was a need, and we were just kind of positioned. I think every city has a developer or two kind of like us across the country. We're part of a network, but it's really a handful of organizations. So
interesting. So how much of your work now is like with the University of Winnipeg, like the original CRC versus the 2.0? Or is the 2.0 kind of started as like what you focus on now?
Yeah, primarily? Right now it's really 2.0, and in part because there's not dollars for post-secondary infrastructure available.
Okay.
I mean, when we started 2.0, we had 11 staff and wound down to 8 at around the start of 2.0. So we had 8 employees in our University of Winnipeg Community Renewal Corporation, and really 2.0 started for those first years buying time from 1.0 staff. And in 2020, we hired our first staff in 2.0. It was a custodial staff because we were just opening our first 2 multi-res buildings.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And I don't know, by the end of this year, we'll have close to 40 staff. So over a 5-year period, pretty rapid expansion. Half of those kind of in building property management side, but really we've expanded our project management side and our development staff and our finance staff consistent with the project volume that we've had.
Interesting.
So it's been exciting, but I'm also having to adjust as a leader to like being a very hands-on CEO on every file to starting to make that adjustment to like turning it over, and as you're training and transitioning staff to being less of a working CEO and more of a fully managing CEO.
Being able to take a step back and see the bigger picture, but also zoom in when you need to.
Yeah. I'm not sure I always do it well, but Yeah.
No, fair enough. I'm curious to know about like your decision making, like as you grow, because that's like pretty substantial growth, pretty substantial like dollar values. You're saying double, triple from the year before. Obviously, you're having to like delegate more. With delegation comes the trust. Like, do you find that a lot of your decisions are like really tough ones, or do you have a staff where like they make it pretty easy on you on who does what?
Well, we've used your HR hiring purposes, so it's been pretty easy staff. Now, in all seriousness, some of our senior staff that we've hired recently, like we have a really, in my view, a really solid team. So the delegation is actually not tough because they're not capable, though there is that kind of learning curve.
Right.
But more because of, I like to be hands-on, and I want to know what's going on at all times. So I think that's the adjustment for me, is kind of that letting go. It's more not that my staff shouldn't be trusted, but that I need to like learn how to do that.
Yeah.
I think there is also that element of, as you're growing, because it is a quick curve, I think, we've actually had to slow the curve a bit. Like I think we are turning away contracts.
Interesting.
Just so that we're ensuring we're absorbing staff at a reasonable rate, and we can manage the risk in the project pipeline in a kind of responsible way, because you are dealing with, primarily in our world, a lot of public dollars. And you want to make sure that you've got good oversight and they're being spent well, and that you're not taking on too much so that you can't deliver. Yeah.
That's probably a different approach, and something you're not used to is like having to turn away contracts, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
In construction, that's pretty rare.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think we know, I mean, particularly because we are in that mixed income housing space and we're in the midst of a housing crisis that's not going anyway soon. We know that there is going to be growth opportunity. We are growing our pipe, but we're able to make some strategic decisions about how much volume we're taking in and trying not to take on too much.
Yeah. And like hindsight's 2020, right? So like you say that from like a mature standpoint, but I bet you the first time it came across your desk,
the first few years it was you're like, is this thing going to succeed or not? And it was very much a startup. Like our first build, our first acquisition was in 2017. It was with $100,000 borrowed from our original company on a vendor take back mortgage, right? Like we had nothing. It was something from nothing, right? So in that period and that initial kind of startup, there was a lot of risk and risk mitigation to see if you had something to go. It's a very different place to be, to know that you're not desperate for the contracts and see if this thing is going to be anything to, hey, let's slow the curve a little bit to make sure we can absorb the staff and the staff expertise and the projects in a reasonable way.
Yeah. That's true entrepreneurship though, taking nothing and building it into something.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I think we're kind of 2.0. I think when people think about the nonprofit sector, I think there's a view that nonprofits are not particularly entrepreneurial. I mean, my experience actually is we have to work very hard for the dollars that we get, and when we get them, we have to use them really judiciously. Right. Which creativity is the mother of invention, I think, and of opportunity. So there is a very entrepreneurial spirit within our organization. We don't get any core operating from anybody. So we really do work on that development cycle, feast or famine development cycle, and our success is based on our ability to get contracts and have some stability through our pipeline. And that's a challenge sometimes.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, like, the first time you had to turn a contract down, like what you were thinking, because like it's not often where, like you mentioned, you took nothing, turned it into something. You guys started churning. You were getting busier and busier, but then all of a sudden you're so busy, you have to turn down work. Like that's not the ordinary type of thing. Right?
It's actually really hard, and because I can recall, I won't be specific about it, but it was with a faith-based organization that much like a project that we had already undertaken successfully, in a pretty prominent position in the downtown, and we would have loved to do the work. We just felt that we didn't have the capacity to do it in the right way for them. Right. And so it's this coming to terms with like, how much can you resource, how much you can take on to do the right thing by the organization and the project, and also you're balancing. You want to make sure that you're maintaining your reputation for the long term, that you're not taking on things that you can't deliver on well for people. Right. So yeah, it means that you're probably the contracts that you have, you're slowing that a little bit, but you're growing in a way that's more responsible and probably sustainable in the long run and will lead to the future contracts. Right.
Yeah. No, smart. Absolutely. And you got to make sure that, I mean, at the end of the day, we're in the service industry. We have to service our clients. Exactly. And if we can't do it appropriately, then, it's turning it down.
And it's tempting. Bet. Like when you do something, when you think you do something well. Right. It's tempting to say, well, we could do it all. Right? And I think there's that discerning of like, we are an organization with a very unique capacity. Like there's only a couple of organizations in town that can do what we do. Yeah. And the need is greater than either ourselves or those other organizations can deliver on. Yeah. Like there's a housing crisis that's real.
Absolutely. Let's talk about that.
But we can't solve that all ourselves. Right. Yeah. But we want to make a dent, and we are.
Because like the housing crisis, a lot of people think like, hey, we'll just build more homes and that'll solve the crisis. Right. Yeah. But like, obviously there's like other organizations like social impacts, communities that play a part in that as well.
And getting the right kind of housing stock.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So what is the CRC 2.0 doing to kind of, help with that within the community? Like obviously they've made a big difference in, I don't know exactly what the footprint is within downtown, whether it's like a 10 block radius or whatever.
Yeah, like we're the largest multi-residential developer in Winnipeg's downtown over the last 10 years.
Right.
And we will have by the end of this year delivered close to 700 units of housing.
Wow.
And we're looking to maybe double that in the next 3 years, right? So it'll be like 1,400 units. But the approach is important. So we're doing a mixed income model. So we're delivering, of those 1,400 units, about 50, if we're successful, about 52% of them will be affordable. And affordable ranging from rent geared to income social housing to median market rent housing on the affordable side, with some percentage of median market rent kind of in between the RGIs and the affordable, depending on the particular building and program that we've accessed through CMHC or the province or the city. But the way we build, so our market units and our affordable units are indistinguishable, and we mix them through our buildings. So there's no stigma. Like, so you don't know if you're in social housing or affordable housing or market housing. We do have some premium units in our buildings, which are distinguishable, about 10% of our units, 10 to 15% of our units in any given building, sometimes none. We've done some work in gender-based violence shelters, which are all like social housing, kind of rent geared income housing, because you're doing transitional type of housing. But for the most part, it's the mixed income model. And I mean, that's important. So you're delivering that you're not going through a gentrification process or a renoviction process or those kind of things. You're building an inclusive way that does it without stigma. And we've also put a strong emphasis, as we did in our original company with the university, on sustainability. Right. And that's resulted for us anyway. I guess, I mean, we can boast having delivered Canada's first GACB zero carbon buildings under the design standard for residential buildings in both the high rise and mid rise type in the country.
First in the country.
And
so for our listeners, let's pause that for a sec. For our listeners, net zero carbon, what does that mean?
Yeah, so a zero carbon building is a building that's highly efficient. So there's a energy efficiency criteria that we also have to meet, like below 80 kilowatt hours per meter squared. But it means that we're zero carbon. That is, there is no carbon footprint to our building when they're operating.
Wow.
And we're about to finish this December a mid-rise, like a four-story with a fifth-story kind of terrace on it, gender-based violence shelter that's also net carbon zero. And as a result, the Canada Green Building Council just recognized us this year as the Green Visionary Company for 2025 for the country. So so there's that element of like making sure you're doing inclusive builds. But I mean, we talked at the beginning about having young children. You know, my 2.5-year-old hasn't seen a summer yet without the smoke filled, the sky filled with smoke. Yep. I mean, this is important stuff. And in Manitoba, it's actually, of the various jurisdictions across the country, like our energy grid is relatively very, very green. Yeah. And so it is easier for us to hit a net carbon building standard in some ways on the GHG side than other jurisdictions. It's tougher on the energy efficiency because Manitoba is the coldest of the major Canadian cities on average per year, but we're the second warmest, next only to Toronto, of the major Canadian cities as well. So our range of efficiency, both in the hot months and the cold months, becomes a challenge for us. But that's about building envelope as much as about mechanical systems, right? Yeah. So I guess we have that approach of where we can, we should.
Okay.
Right. And so whether it's on the social side, making sure we're doing the inclusion, or the sustainability side, if it's easier in Manitoba to do it at anywhere else in the country, then Manitobans should be like leading the way.
Should be, absolutely. Yeah. So you talk a lot about like energy efficiency, sustainability, but like profitability, you know, I know that you're not for profit, but a lot of companies, like profitability comes into play there. But the sustainability, profitability, the two are not necessarily mutually exclusive.
No, right? In fact, I mean, that part of for us, I think we want to kind of communicate that, again, where you can, you should, and where you can make things mutually reinforcing rather than mutually exclusive, you should at least attempt to investigate. And I think people would be surprised on the ROI even in Manitoba. And I think whether you're not for profit or for profit, there are various incentives out there. You know, Canada has a green technology incentive for the private sector and not-for-profit sector. It's actually 30% of your costs for green technologies.
Oh, really?
And 15 for the not-for-profit sector. So it's actually more beneficial if you're a for-profit. And the province has green technology. If you're in geothermal or domestic hot water, solar pretreatment, they'll do 10%. So you can start to stack some of those incentives. And there's some incentive. There's actually cash grants through the various sort of governments at periods of time as well. So not only are the technologies becoming more affordable, but I think the incentives are there. And I think it just takes a bit of imagination and time to think through it and really push consultants. And I hope that as an organization, because we're working with multiple designers and engineers, we're doing that kind of local knowledge building and knowledge transfer that ultimately could be something that Manitoba actually leads the way in and makes available across the country. There's a market advantage, I think, potentially for our sector in Manitoba.
Absolutely. And like for an industry like construction, that's kind of like, you know, there's a lot of innovative companies out there, don't get me wrong, but the industry as a whole has a stigma where like we're kind of stuck in the past. We've always done it this way.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the sustainable energy efficiency thing is like here for the future? Like the future's now? Is it going to be continue to progress with certain builders? Or
I mean, I think it has to. I mean, we just spent some time in Dublin, Ireland at the International Social Housing Forum.
Nice.
And it's very clear to me how far we are behind Europe.
Oh, is that right?
As an industry,
Yeah.
right? Both development, design, construction. And so,
can you provide a couple examples?
Yeah, just in terms of their ranking position, like they I think it's a four category sustainability model. So you're a level 1, 2, 3, 4 house. Right. If you're, I think it's 4 is the lowest, but you can't build anything that's not level 2 or level 1. You're either net carbon zero or highly efficient.
I see.
And they're really, all their incentives are based on really looking at bringing up their old stock to the level 2 or level 1 on renovations. And their conversations were more about, we've done our assessments of our whole housing stock and what needs to be renovated up to the more efficient and net carbon zero levels. Now we're actually, there was one organization that had a nonprofit that had $250 million residential units across Europe. And they are developing, they've already done the exercise on what they need to renovate to get their buildings energy efficient. They're now looking at the units that have been impacted by flood, fire, and other natural disasters and doing climate mitigation planning. Like that's not even a conversation really here in Canada yet.
Right.
But as we know, like we had a build that's been delayed 8 weeks in Flin Flon this year that we're having trouble to insure. So Europe's already grappling with the things that we've externalized, like insurance costs, the ability to build because of fires, flood mitigation damage, like if you're in Calgary or those things that we've kind of externalized in the development and real estate and construction industry, they're caving in on us. It's going to be more costly for insurance, and it requires a sector-wide response to respond to those. So I think it was just indicative of me of how much work we have to do. So we're not going to be sending experts over teaching other people how to do and creating service industry jobs on this is how you can do it. No. We've got a lot to learn.
Right.
And if we're going to be competitive, as we need to be grappling with that seriously. And here's the great thing, like doing that not only creates like new job opportunities and those kind of things, but it's actually the right thing to do, right? So our kids can see blue skies and green grass.
Yeah. It's kind of disappointing to see how far behind we are, but on the flip side, also like at least we have Europe to look to as like almost like a mentor.
Yeah, just
right?
So there's an ability to learn
Right.
and then to push and contextualize, right? And there are things that we can do that they can't do. We got lots of land. We got we've got
or maybe there's
places.
some things that they did and made big mistakes on that
Right.
now we don't have to go through that hard process of learning that the hard way.
Right.
Right. So, what would you say is your like most proud project that you've worked at since you've launched the 2.0? Like obviously you guys have done a lot of really good things to the communities in many different ways. Is there one project in particular that stands out?
Well, each project is different, right? So like 308 Colony, like our Solera Flats build, that's Canada's first net carbon zero high rise. It has building integrated solar voltaic and solar thermal preheat treatments, and it was kind of neat to go through that process, and it's going to deliver kind of affordable units along with market and premium units. That's an interesting project, but I feel just as good about some of the work that we're doing, say on the transitional housing in Flin Flon with the Friendship Center there, right? So an Indigenous-led project, some work that we're doing in South Osborne with Fisher River Cree Nation on preserving some heritage, not designated, but some old structure that's important to the community and renovating it, and it's been sitting vacant for like 10 years and a bit of a eyesore for that South Osborne community, or we're working on a gender-based violence shelter in Winkler, and that's important to us. Like it took us several rounds of trying to get that thing funded. It finally did this past February. But like that's in a place in the province where a couple years ago there was that tragic violent incident with the family in Carmen, right? And that this facility will serve that area, right? So you know that each project has its own kind of impact. It's its own kind of problem to solve from a development and funding perspective. But each of them also has kind of a different social impact in ways that matter to us. Yeah.
Yeah. And like obviously a big part of your job is like reshaping downtown Winnipeg, or that's obviously a primary focus, it seems. Like what do you say to somebody who's, downtown Winnipeg has come a long way, but obviously still has a long way to go.
Yeah,
right? And there's still people that are like scared to live downtown, scared to go to school downtown. Like what would you say to somebody who's like, I don't want to live downtown, it's too rough? Yeah,
and I think there's been cycles in the downtown of kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I think we're emerging from a 1 step back. I think the last, 3/4 of the decade wasn't kind to the downtown. But I think we're emerging from that again.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think there's a lot of perception around, like, people who are street involved being, for the most part, maybe appearances being scarier than realities. And you don't know that until you kind of lived and worked in the downtown. I mean, I live in, North Kildonan area. I've had my garage broken into a couple of times and my car vandalized several times, right? Yep. But no one's going to report on that being near the university vicinity or something like that, right? And so I think there's when you've lived and worked downtown, you understand when someone is like actively using and could become violent, and you steer clear.
Yep.
But there's a lot of other people that I think appear scarier than they might be. And I think once you live and work in downtown and you understand kind of the steps and you kind of that wisdom, like downtown's a great place to be. I mean, one of my impressions from Dublin was, because a lot of its infrastructure was kind of Victorian era, like 1880 to 1920 builds in their downtown. And they're kind of a center of high tech, like the European, after Brexit, all the European, like Google's headquarters are now in Dublin, right? But in their downtown, which looks very much like our exchange, and it gave me a kind of vision of like what our downtown could actually look like with that kind of investment. And it's actually kind of exciting. So for me, I think as the city grows in population and those opportunities arise, I think if we want people to want to come to Winnipeg, you need a thriving downtown.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would totally agree with your comment earlier about like reality versus perception. Like I live in St. James, and I've had my like car vandalized out there. I've worked downtown here for over 10 years. I've parked in the same parkade for 10 years. Never once has it ever been broken into. I feel extremely safe walking around here. There's a lot of positives of like obviously CRC investing, but other companies like Alstrom Properties, Concord Projects, relocating downtown, like lots of good, really nice buildings popping up. And you're starting to hear about like 300 Main, more people like wanting to actually come downtown. And you're right. I think like for the city to thrive, we need more of that and for it to continue on for not just like a couple of years, but into the future.
Yeah. We were taking a member of the media up a tour of Three-Way Colony at the Solera Flats there up in the upper floors, and they could see all the downtown. And they remarked about, wow, you can see like 6 different construction cranes from up here throughout the downtown, right? Like I think it surprised them a little bit and gave them a little bit of encouragement about what's actually going on in the downtown.
Oh, for sure. And there's more cranes downtown Winnipeg right now than probably the last like 10 years combined. Yeah. And it's really positive to see that. Yeah. One of my staff was looking at 300 Main as a place to move into.
Sure.
And you could actually see from the balcony that she was going to rent right into the Goldeye Stadium.
Right.
Which I thought was awesome. And it's something that a lot of people don't even think about is like how much activity there really is downtown. That's fun. The Forks, Goldeyes, the Jets. Like there's just so much to do.
Yeah.
Right.
And festival season during the summer, whether it's Jazz Fest or Fringe Fest that just wound up, right? Like there's lots going on.
Yeah. We're actually touring with the YCLM, the Young Construction Leaders of Manitoba.
Yeah.
We're doing the Solera Flats tour.
Okay, all right.
I think it's August 21st.
Yeah.
Are you going to be a part of that?
I probably.
Yeah? Yeah, good. So you've been doing this for almost, or probably about a decade or so now. Obviously, there was like, you battled through COVID.
Yeah.
Now the tariffs. Like throughout the last 10 years, there's been a lot of like supply chain problems, just like economic crises in general. Like, what did you learn coming, through COVID during a development era?
Yeah. In our world, there's also the overlay of ever-changing policy landscape and funding, right? Because we're a nonprofit, so depending on which government of the day is in power at which level and how coordinated they are, that can create its own overlay onto everything else everybody's experiencing.
Okay.
I mean, the way we attract investors or investment, right, is a bit different. Interestingly for us, because there has been a housing crisis that preceded COVID and has been accelerated coming out of COVID, that actually provided some stability. It has provided us some stability through the storms because the underlying issue isn't going away anytime soon, right? I mean, we certainly experienced in COVID when there were kind of record vacancies in downtown. We had just we finished construction during COVID on our two first buildings and started to lease them. And so it took us a bit longer on the market side. The affordable units went right away. And like on one of our buildings, I think last report I had, it was like 430 households waiting for 56 units, and it's only 3 years old, right? Right. Like so the pressure and the need for the kinds of units that we're building weren't there. But we certainly COVID had impact, but it wasn't existential for us. And we had to do some planning, but we were actually growing through COVID, so it was odd. Like we were kind of probably differently impacted than others, and because. We need to have viable projects, financially viable projects. I don't have investors that I need to give 15% returns to, right? I need to make sure that we have enough funding to make sure that they're solvent and sustainable in the long run. And where we collect our investments is from public sector investors. It's a bit different than we still have that variable kind of development cycle, but some of our incentives for building are different, and some of the reasons for which our investors, like the public sector, invests in us is different. That said, I mean, we know that there are private sector folks who have had to shelve projects or pause projects. I mean, we have in two of our projects, we're partnered, like the Solera Flats, with a private sector investor who couldn't make it go as a private sector development. But we said, well, there's some tax incentives and things like that are available to us that aren't available to you. Let us look at it and see if we can pencil it out with you initially. And then we said, you're right, you can't do it your way, but if we're your 51% partner, this is what we can do. Right. And so brought it back to life. So some of those incentives and things that we can access have kind of smoothed some curves. Like even when I think about our Marketlands project there by City Hall, I mean, coming out of COVID, there was some cost escalations, things like that. But one of our cultural funders had a COVID relief fund for expenses, and part of the landscaping was covered through a post-COVID downtown recovery grant, right? So for us, some of those crises have also created opportunities. And for us in project management land, I am always talking about how risk is actually, in project management terms, a neutral term. Right? Most people focus, especially my finance staff, think about risk as always about the threat and never about the opportunity. And so I really push on the risk is a neutral term, and there's opportunity and there's threats. Yeah. Often the opportunities offset the threats, and it can sometimes solve them. And so when you're doing your risk assessments of projects, don't forget to look at the opportunities. And I think it leads into some of those sustainability or affordability questions. Pushing yourselves in looking at some opportunities in those domains may curb some of the risks on the downside risks. Some of those upside risks may actually appear in a way that smooth out some of those downside risks. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that speaks to like true leadership, though, is I think a lot of people look at something like that and they look at risk, whereas you look at it and you're like, but what about the upside, right? What about the opportunity at hand, right? And obviously, like,
you've gone from, like you said, 8 staff to 40. You did your first $30 million job in 2016 or so, and now you guys are doing hundreds of millions. That takes like strong leadership, right? Now, I've never personally met an entrepreneur or intrapreneur, like an entrepreneur in a company, right, that hasn't like done something that's really boring over and over and over again, like
Right.
day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out. But like, what's one thing that you've done throughout your career that like you thought people might think it's really boring, but you've just done it for 10 years and it's like a daily habit of yours now, or weekly habit that's got you to where you are?
Reading the news daily. I mean, I think for us, because of that kind of ever-changing political landscape,
Right.
and for me to keep myself engaged and interested,
Yeah.
and feed my political beast, which still exists, right? Part of our success and the ability, I think, to grow on our curve is in part, and it's not just me. I have some staff with some political sense as well, that have been intentionally hired for that skill set.
Okay.
But part of our ability to understand in our development field, understand is really to be able to read the overall political context and understand and anticipate what might be coming as a result. And I think it goes to that, like looking at risk and looking at where are the opportunities in a crisis, right?
Yeah.
Like for most people, when we think about the tariff crisis, right, a lot of people say, well, God, that's going to lead to materials cost escalation, interest rate increases, and all that kind of stuff. So we look at that and we're facing the same things, and we're trying to assess those same things, and it creates anxieties for us for the same reasons. But I think my staff and I are always also paying attention to what's going on in the broader context. Okay, yeah, but that means the federal government is going to have to do some spends to create local economy, and on their counter tariffs, they're probably going to need to do set-asides, and there's still a housing crisis, so they may be looking to set aside some grant dollars out of the counter tariff revenues that are raised to help us offset those cost escalations, because the housing crisis still exists. So we're not going to panic about it, but we're going to pay attention to it and see if there's an opportunity there, or an ability to even talk to some of the political decision makers about where there might be opportunities for them to create markets for steel and aluminum and those kind of things in a way that also meets their other policy objectives, at a higher level. And so I think, I don't know if there's anything that I'm particularly routinized at, but I think there is an intentional daily paying attention to something outside of our particular daily business that assists us.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's also important just to not go into panic mode and to sleep on things.
Yeah.
Right? Like, who was it? It was Jeff Bezos that said he never makes a decision after 10 a.m.
Right.
Have you heard that?
No,
So
yeah.
I thought that was pretty interesting. Like, he does all of his hard work from like 7 to 10 a.m. and after 10 a.m., if there's a meeting, it's fine, but he's never going to make a decision on something until the next day.
Right.
And I think that's interesting because like it allows you to sleep on things, really think them through. I mean, you've got a pretty big team where you have like project managers in house.
Yeah.
You do your own fund, like grant writing in house, which I think is interesting. HR, finance, all that stuff. So there's probably people coming to you all the time with questions, decisions. Like, do you ever get decision fatigue yourself?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm been with this organization for now 9 years, and the early years were tough years.
Right.
Right. What are my most significant challenge, I think, is how do you achieve work-life balance while you're doing a startup with this kind of growth curve, and make sure that you got time for your friends and family. And I think that's still a work in process. I don't think I've hit that balance yet. but as a result of that, I mean, that wears, right? Like, and I think the decisions, certainly I feel from time to time, the decisions I make can be make or break decisions. Like if I make a bad one here, like the noose is around my neck and it can get tight quick.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So there are potential downside risks that have real impacts.
Mm-hmm.
I think I mean, it's helpful for me that my motivation is about community impact. So whenever you have that fatigue, you also see the reward on, yeah, but we're having this kind of impact on people's lives. So like, suck it up and keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So because you've always worked in, you were a civil servant to start, then now nonprofit, like community development.
Yeah.
Like that's always been your motivation throughout your career.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably family of origin stuff.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
grew up kind of in the Methodist. So you focused on your own character, but it wasn't about focusing on your character for you. It was about, you know, that's kind of between you and the divine at the end of the day. But it was more about like, so how working on you actually impacts what you do in your community and how you leave the world a better place at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's really diplomatic. I like it because like I think a lot of people when they think of like real estate development, the first thing they think of is like money or profitability or like, you know, how to get rich quick when obviously, you know, that stuff, you know, could be
that's
true.
Someone's other
not
bag.
Be true.
That's someone else's bag. That's not our motivation.
But it's not at all what you guys are after here. And then also like when you're hiring for a not-for-profit, it's different than when you're hiring for a for-profit company, right? Yeah. Like you have parameters and budgets that you have to work within. So when you're hiring, like what are you looking for in a person?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the parameters of pay. Like I actually don't like the notion that a non-for-profit should pay less than the for-profit, which is actually an attitude that's out there. Like I want good people and competent people.
Yeah.
People that can deliver in the private sector and the nonprofit sector alike. Like when I'm looking at a project manager, and I do have budget constraints, but I want to make sure we're paying them kind of market rates insofar as we can. I think what are we looking for besides good values alignment?
Yeah.
Right? And you can sense that pretty quickly. And we have had staff that have taken pay cut to come work for us because they care about the mission for sure. But I think the trade-off for that is because we are kind of a growing organization, they'll catch up to where they were by taking this step back. Yeah. In those instances where they've done that, I think. And
that's so important. Like one thing I want to share that I feel like we kind of just skimmed over there is people joining a company for the mission.
Yeah.
Because like so many people will leave for an extra $5,000, $10,000, but 6 months later, they still don't like their job. They're still not happy. They're still really dissatisfied. They're not fulfilled. There's no reward at the end of the day. Yeah. But then you get somebody that goes into a company where like they see what the mission is. They're tied into it with the rest of the group. They're glued together and they're actually working towards a common goal. Yeah. You're going to get so much more out of your staff. They're going to be happier in their job and a happier person is going to perform better. Yeah. Right? So yeah, I'm glad that you touched on that because, you know, in our experience in working with you guys actually has been like we've always had a really tremendous response rate of people that are like super interested.
That's nice to hear.
Yeah. And it's easy to weed out the ones that are serious or not because every company has constraints that they need to work with in terms of budgets to hire project managers or whatever it is, right? But it's the ones that are actually like really glued to the mission, the ones that are really interested, you know, those are the ones you want, and those are always the ones you guys hire. So
and also I think for us, team, right? I mean, it's growing, but because it's growing. You want a good sense of like people who are team players,
right?
Like people who are adhered to the mission, professional in their work, but also function as part of a team and are call them kind of yes people. Right, their first instinct is, I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to do it.
Right,
right.
That's
and
good,
we're going to do it together, So,
I love when people can make a decision based on like 50% of the data.
Yes,
you know, like I don't need to know the whole picture before making a decision. I want to say yes and figure it out as we go. Yeah, that's part of the journey.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier, you know, you've done a few $100 million in developments here, but in the next 3 years. Big growth plans.
If we're successful, right?
If we're successful, that's fine. But tell me about the next 3 to 5 years. Like, if you're successful, perfect world, where's Jeremy going to be in 3 to 5 years from now? And where's the CRC 2.0 going to be? Or will it be a 3.0?
Well, no state secrets. I'll talk about ones that have been announced. So we have a number of projects that have been publicly announced by the city through the Housing Accelerator. So we're currently working, for those who are in Winnipeg and driving by the site, we're working on the Marketlands project, but that building, even though it's a large building, looks pretty small on that site.
I've seen it. I agree.
And but just to the north, we have another 275 units and 30,000 square feet with a fairly prominent nonprofit for anchor commercial tenant in there. So I think that'll be impactful. We just got our height variance from the city to do a tower there. So as part of that build, so there's another 275 units I hope there, plus some 30,000 square feet of commercial space for a significant nonprofit, plus a daycare with the Y at that site, and some commercial at grade as well.
Wow.
That ones will be neat. It'll have an interior courtyard on top of our parkade so that the kids who are at the daycare have a protected green space to be on, and the tenants and the other commercial tenant can kind of use it as well. So create some green space in the downtown that's kind of protected. It also have a pocket park, like kind of opposite Princess Street campus. So that's like a big thing. And to the south, we're working on it was the Marketlands, is where our farm market used to be, like our farmers market used to be for the city. We're going to do a food hall kind of thing at grade. We're partnered with Food and Beverage Association Manitoba to look at a co-packing facility there. So that'll be a bit of nonprofit gift back to the for-profit sector. So that's to allow people who are manufacturing kind of goods, and they're doing it at like church kitchens and that kind of stuff, or that kind of scale, but can't kind of scale up to kind of a industry factory type of scale without a midterm stop. So this will be a co-packing facility for labeling, but a kitchen that's been certified for export, right? So thinking about Trump's tariffs, so this provides like local economic opportunities for creating a local export industry, right? So around food. So that's what's kind of happening at the Marketland. So I think that's kind of an exciting package.
Absolutely.
We just the other day, the city announced we're partnering with Transit on a site just south of the transit garages. We'd like to build 140 units there, and some service, like transit public service, like their public services center into that space. So a joint venture with the city, which we kind of need. We're looking at the Granite Curling Club for another 110 units, and to try to take some of the revenues from that one, actually give it to the club so they can do some heritage. Like they've got a pool of money ongoing for heritage renovation, so that's a city facility. We're looking at some of these gender-based violence shelters. One in Winkler, we hope to start here in Flin Flon. I think we got our insurance. The fires moved far enough away that we can start, so we're hoping to do some construction there, so a little bit of expansion there. We're looking at a co-living project kind of in the downtown area, so that's to do kind of congregant living for young people so that they have affordable kind of congregant, so strangers living with one another and then sharing kind of bedrooms and washrooms, but having common eating areas and things like that. So you have, 3 or 4 pods of people living together, coming together in co-living spaces. Cool. We do that in our student housing, right?
Yeah. I live in student
houses
dorms.
And some housing. Yeah, some housing. But like for that, if you're new to a city and you're 25, you've graduated,
right?
You lived in co-living in your student housing, right? We have a house that's been done, and you live with 7 other people. You might want to live with 5 or 6 other people in the same kind of way as you're just beginning your professional life and don't have the money to, maybe have a shorter income, or you're trying to do something entrepreneurial, so you need cheaper rent to kind of invest your revenues elsewhere. So we're looking at some of that as part of a national study with CMHC right now and seeing if we can get a project that's feasible that way. We're doing some of this work around Central Parks for 180 units of a long-term care facility and renovating that. So there's lots, it's like something like 700 or 800 units kind of in development, some of them partially funded already. We got some news today on one of them. So, I'm quite hopeful that we're kind of in that kind of 1,400 unit range in the next 3 years of development. And then who knows? I mean, I think one of the interesting things about we do some other social housing development, like we're doing a daycare expansion, cultural space expansion with Connie Kanichik on McDermott that finishes this summer, and doing a bit of a sweat lodge development with them thereafter. So we do some stuff outside of housing, but I think the future is I hope we're continuing to make an actual dent. Like at 1,400 units, you're feeling like you're actually starting to make a dent in the housing crisis as an organization, or contributing to making a dent. we were last year designated a frequent builder with CMHC, so we know in terms of nonprofit developers, we're the most active in Western Canada. I don't see that slowing right now. So I think the future is bright for us. I think we do want to focus a lot of our activities in the downtown. I think that's important for the city.
Yeah. I love what you guys are doing
Yeah.
in terms of like building Winnipeg into just a better place. Like affordable housing, more sustainable, net zero carbon.
Yeah.
Like these are things that most other developers are not even considering, right? So like most developers when they build, they're just thinking about how much money they can line their pockets with, how many units can they build that they can rent out at a large price and keep the building moving. So
Yeah, there's short-term and long-term.
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Thinking.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But then there's also the impact you have, like you said, on the community and how positive
Yeah.
you need to be, and that's the motivator for you.
Yeah.
And they definitely got the right person in place
Thanks.
at the CEO chair.
Yeah.
So I love what you guys are doing. I love the ambitious plans. I'm going to be watching the journey very closely as the years progress. And thank you so much for coming on the show today, man.
Thanks
Appreciate
for
it.
having us.
Yeah.